So Narendra Modi has been described as India's rescuer-in-chief in the context of rescuing Indians in trouble overseas. The government is talking about the Prime Minister's adaptive strategy with the United States and diplomatic upgrade with France, again, both in 2025. The Congress has hit right back, saying, under Narendra Modi, India's global standing is actually crumbling. So let's try and make sense of the achievements versus the challenges. Joining me on India First is Supriya Srinath, Chairperson, Social Media and Digital Platforms, member of the Congress Working Committee. Rohan Gupta is National Spokesperson of the BJP. Sushant Sareen is a Senior Fellow at the Observer Research Foundation. Professor Brahma Chelani is a very well-respected Strategic Affairs Analyst and former Advisor to India's National Security Council. Also with me is Senior Journalist and Analyst Sandeep Unnithan. Rohan Gupta, Congress says under Narendra Modi, India's global standing is crumbling. They've given specific instances. Take, for example, the IMF giving $1 billion to Pakistan on the 9th of May during Operation Sindoor. World Bank deciding to give $40 billion to Pakistan soon after Operation Sindoor. And the ADB pledging another $800 million again after Operation Sindoor.
Well, first of all, I think you should ask question to Congress party about their stand. I think my voice is echoing. Can you just change it? Because I'm not able.
Yeah. Go on, Rohan Gupta.
Yeah, so Sahil, after G7 statement of Canada Prime Minister, you can see the situation of Congress party. They were premature in criticizing. They could not wait. And I think now they should come out and apologize that why they spoke about something they should have waited for. And overall, if you see these 11 years, our policy has been independent, aggressive. It has to be... Hello?
Yep. Go on, Rohan Gupta, Gaurav Sawant this side. Go on. My question to you, and I'll repeat my question if in case you weren't able to hear me. India's global standing, Congress party says it's crumbling. G7 I'll come to in just a moment. But my question is, IMF pledging $1 billion to Pakistan, World Bank deciding to give $40 billion soon after Op Sindoor, and ADB. The Congress has listed out all these points, $800 million again after Operation Sindoor, sir.
Sahil, this is the problem with Congress party. They keep on changing their goalpost every second day. Now they have answered for G7, so they will ask other questions. See, you have to see the overall picture, 11 years where India has moved. Our policy of, thinking West and acting East and connecting the Central Asia, it is working. You see the G20 presidency where we could cite the declaration by all the members. It's a big achievement. IMEC, India, Middle East Economic, European Economic Corridor. So these are the big achievements. So Congress party, they can keep on changing their goalposts. Every next day they will ask different questions. As far as Pakistan is concerned, they should remember what they did on 26/11. They were begging for the statement of US condemning the Pakistan. They never acted on it. They were worried that if they act, something will happen. They were scared. They never had confidence on their own forces. And that's why the forces, they stopped the forces to act against Pakistan. And they are talking about us. Today it is an independent and confident and aggressive foreign policy. Nobody can see at India. If you are going to attack our people, we will go into your deeps and attack your military establishments. So this is the difference. It is aggressive, independent. One more thing, if you see Ukraine-Russia war also, or you can see Israel-Arab balance, India could keep that balance properly without any kind of issues in foreign policy. So India is moving ahead. After 11 years, India is not dependent on anybody. We are now independent, and we are in top 5 nations where nobody can
Pakistan
ignore.
Remains
and the evidence of that is
or a serious threat. Let me bring in Supriya Srinath. Supriya, did the Congress jump the gun on the G7 invite? Just take a look at what Mark Carney said while extending that invitation to the Prime Minister. He said, and I want to quote, as chair of G7, it is important to invite the most important countries to attend the talk about important issues such as energy, artificial intelligence, critical mineral, and India is really at the very center of the global supply chains, madam.
There is no denying that India is at the very center of all that supply chain, and I am not going to call you Sahil. I will continue to call you by your name, Gaurav Sawant. But first up, the invite came belatedly. Let the government not run away from the fact that the invite came belatedly. I'm glad it has come, because this is not about Mr. Modi's personal show. This is about India. I was aggrieved that India did not get an invite. I'm glad the invite has come. It has come belatedly, and that embarrasses me, that upsets me as an Indian. But your show is about 11 years of foreign policy. And let me make some opening remarks before I go on to talk about that. Something was said about the G20 by the BJP spokesperson. G20 hosting is cyclical. You were supposed to get it 2 years back. You wanted to delay it to 2024. All right, no issues with that. But every member of the G20 is going to host that meeting. Because it's cyclical, every member gets to do so. Because it's going to happen in Brazil now. 2611. That's the only thing I want to say before I move on to foreign policy. Don't you dare bring up 2611. Because after 2611, every perpetrator, every terrorist was hunted down. They were gunned down, they were arrested and then hanged till death. The difference between 2611 and Pahalgam today is that none of the terrorists of Pahalgam terror attack have so far been arrested. It happened on the 22nd of April, almost 50 days to that event. Reality is that Riyasi, where, devotees were attacked in a bus, a year later, not a single arrest made. That's the difference. We hunted down terrorists and made them meet their maker. That's the first thing I want to say. And let's move on to 11 years of foreign policy. I want to make a rather big picture statement, and more as an Indian and of course as a congresswoman here. In the last 11 years, we have seen foreign policy being replaced by photo ops. Diplomacy has been consistently replaced by photo ops. Diplomacy is not hugging. Diplomacy is not going and getting pictures clicked in a certain angle that you look strong. Diplomacy is that you put India's interest first. And I want to enumerate a few points that will establish what has happened. Let's talk about what has recently happened, and then we will go further. And this is the last point I want to make, and then I'm sure you will come back to me in the discussion. Operation Sindoor is of course going to be successful because we have absolute faith in the valor and courage of our disciplined armed forces. They taught Pakistan and gave Pakistan a bloody blow. Mr. Modi decided to do a ceasefire. On what conditions, one does not know. That's the first point. The second point is what happened thereafter and where did our diplomacy fail? Pakistan gets an IMF loan, and that IMF loan was given despite our resistance, and not a single nation supported us against that loan. That's IMF. World Bank has decided to give a $40 billion aid. ADB, Mr. Modi meets the ADB chief on the 1st of June. On the 3rd of June, 48 hours later, ADB decides to give Pakistan $800 million. The biggest failure has been that Pakistan and India that were hyphenated after 2611, Pakistan was seen as a dubious terror state, is now being dehyphenated. The US president speaks about Pakistan and India in the same breath. We cannot be spoken about in the same breath. We are a democracy. We are a strong country. Pakistan is a dying nation. It harbors terrorists. And the last point I want to make. Pakistan goes ahead and gets a chairmanship of Taliban in the UN Security Council. It gets, and so ironical, a terror state like Pakistan gets to get the vice chairmanship of the counter-terror committee, and we keep quiet. What happened to our influence in these multilateral agencies? We go to Kuwait on the 27th of May, and on the 28th, Kuwait lifts a 19-year ban on Pakistan visas. I mean, somebody has to turn around and ask the question, what is happening to our diplomacy? I'm sure we'll talk about America and China, Maldives, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Nepal in just a bit.
I'll come to them in just a moment. Step by step, I'll come to those points. Rohan, you want to quickly respond before I bring in our strategic affairs analyst on 2611? I'll weigh in since I covered 2611, as did Sandeep, who was with me there.
Yeah.
But
so
quickly,
Gaurav, my apologies to you because I didn't have screen in front of me, so I
no problem. Go ahead.
I named you wrongly. Can you hear me,
rose
Gaurav?
by another name will still smell as sweet.
So Gaurav, see, Congress party has no moral, right to talk about Pakistan. This is the same Pakistan they surrendered POK in 1948. This is the same Pakistan they surrendered 80% of the Sindhu water in Sindhu, the Indus Treaty. This is the same Pakistan they continued MFN status for the years. This is the same Pakistan in 1971, even after, arresting the 93,000 soldiers, they returned back and they never talk about POK.
Okay.
What Pakistan they are talking about?
Past in just a moment,
after 2611, they didn't have courage even to talk to Pakistan. They couldn't attack Pakistan. This is the mindset Pakistan entered, that whatever we can do on India,
You
India
cannot talk
will
on
never
facts,
retaliate.
that's your problem.
And that is the answer Modi government gave. If you will try to see at India, look at India, we will make sure that you
Let
will
me
be
quickly
vanished.
bring in
That is the
Sushant
difference
Sareen,
between our foreign
because-
policy today. That is the courage what we have
you
shown.
know, IMF
that if
loans,
you attack
on
us, we are
IMF
going to attack with
loans,
double force.
okay,
This is called diplomacy.
Supriya,
And
quick
all
30
other
second
countries,
interjection,
India
ma'am,
is the only
before I
country
bring in
which
our
could
specialist.
balance the
Supriya, go on, ma'am.
proper fine balance between Israel and Arab countries. India is
No,
the only
I don't want to
country
take
which could
unnecessary
proper-
time.
maintain proper
The
balance
entire
between Russia and
opposition.
Ukraine.
Sir,
India
it's
is
my
the
turn
only
to
country
speak.
wherever
Mr.
you
Gupta,
have
it's my
discussed
turn to
first
speak. My
first
name is
point of
Supriya.
contact with
Please ask him to keep
Okay,
quiet.
This is
Rohan
what
Gupta,
India
30
is.
seconds. Supriya is quickly
Our
responding
total stature
before I
across
bring
the
in
world
our
has
strategic
changed.
affairs
And your
analyst.
first question to the Congress.
Sir, my question to you was about IMF loans, but go on.
Can you please
Supriya, you
keep
wanted to
quiet? Thank
respond.
you.
Absolutely.
I just
we are
want to
not
say one thing, and that one
Only
thing is
Supriya.
crystal clear. The reality is that the opposition, a united opposition, and the entire
Government,
country
before
was
getting
with you.
response from
Why
G7
did you call a
questions, you should have
ceasefire?
waited
You should
for
have got
something.
back the
Okay, you should
POK.
have-
Why did you not
On
do that? Please don't
ceasefire
speak
and
in
POK,
between.
let me
Supriya is my
quickly
name.
bring in
Hopefully not
Sushant
your name
Sareen.
so far.
Other countries,
Okay,
our
okay,
enemy country,
Supriya.
Pakistan,
No,
they are
hold on,
using
hold
your
on.
What sort of a debate
Rohan,
is this?
Rohan, give me a
Do you have
moment.
verbal
Rohan,
diarrhea?
hold
I'm
on,
not telling
hold
you
on,
this
hold
is
on,
the
hold on.
question to
I want only
government.
Mr.
Sushant
Gupta,
Sareen on the
but
screen
in
for a
that
moment,
light-
please. Sushant Sareen, whether it's Turkey or Azerbaijan or China, they strongly stand with Pakistan. Is there merit in the Congress saying India's global standing is crumbling the way funds are being pledged to Pakistan, whether it's IMF, ADB, and the World Bank?
No, I think, look, you can politicize whatever you want to politicize. The IMF program was not sanctioned post Op Sindoor. It's an ongoing program. They'd already got the first tranche. They were going to get the second tranche, which was already approved. It just had to be rubber stamped by the board when India started raising objections. And I think the objections we raised were mostly political. And frankly, the decisions were not going to be taken on political lines because we simply don't have the kind of numbers we need to stop it. It would have been taken on economic parameters. And it's not, Gaurav, incidentally, it's not as though this is the first time the Pakistanis have got an IMF loan. Even after 2008, after the 26/11 attacks, which Supriya very correctly says that, India and Pakistan was almost treated like a pariah nation, Pakistan got at least 2 or 3 IMF bailouts. Pakistan has been getting World Bank assistance for the last 80 years, despite its dubious record. And what the Pakistanis have got this time, it's not $40 billion. That's a dumbing down of the figure. What they've actually got is a 20 billion 10-year program. It's called a country support program or something to that effect. It's a 10-year program, which basically means they get about $1.8 to $2 billion a year for projects. And that is what that program is. It's for 10 years because the World Bank said that, normally we used to have a 3-year program. It wasn't good enough. Now we have a much more perspective kind of a thing. Now, if $2 billion a year is going to save Pakistan, good luck to them. Third, even the ADB program, these are not negotiations which happen overnight. Supriya has been an economic journalist and a very distinguished one at that. She certainly knows how these programs operate. So that is as far as the multilateral institutions are concerned. On the ceasefire, Gaurav, I think it's very clear. And again, look, they have the right to do whatever politics they want to do. But I think it was very clear from a strategic angle. There was a specific purpose behind Operation Sindoor. It was to hit the bases, number one. Number two, it was to dominate the escalation ladder. We did both. Nobody was saying that we are now going to go and wage a complete all-out war on Pakistan and capture POK, etc., etc. That was not the plan of the operation. That was not the objective of the operation. And because you notched up astounding successes, to then extend the operation would have meant that you get enmeshed into a quagmire, into a war, which you had not prepared for in the very first instance. So I think it was a sensible decision to not prolong the conflict more than what we wanted to do. So I would imagine that is the reality. Baki, people are free to do whatever politics they want to do. Yeah, it's a free country.
Oh, absolutely. But Professor Chilani, our campaign to isolate Pakistan,
Can I come
that
in?
seems to be hitting one air pocket after the other. You know, funds being pledged to Pakistan, China blocking the naming of attackers at the United Nations, Pakistan's fair probe demand being backed by countries like Iran, Turkey, Malaysia. Is that a setback for us, Professor Chilani?
Is this the first time that is happening?
Okay, fair enough. Professor Chilani?
Well, the fact is that Operation Sindoor has highlighted the fact that India's fight against cross-border terrorism is a lonely fight. Look at the United States. The Trump administration till date has not even mentioned the core issue that triggered this crisis, trans-border terrorism. Not just Trump. Has anybody in his administration mentioned cross-border terrorism as an issue? Why? Why? Even when the Indian parliamentarians went to Washington recently and met the Vice President Vance and the Deputy Secretary of State, the US statements did not mention cross border terrorism. The question is why? Why? After all, Prime Minister Modi has invested considerable political capital in building good relations with Washington. So
So is that failure of India's
why hasn't that
diplomacy?
investment delivered at a critical time?
Is that failure of Indian diplomacy? What's your take on it?
My take.
Yes.
See, on the larger picture, India's international profile and geopolitical weight are clearly rising. There's no doubt about that. The fact is that under 3 successive prime ministers, India has been rising. And India's foreign policy has 2 defining features. First, it's shorn of ideology. And 2, because it's non-ideological, it's pragmatic. And also, India's foreign policy is one defining. Third feature is balance. India's emphasis on pursuing a balanced foreign policy is apparent from its membership of rival multilateral groupings. It's a member of the US-led Quad, but it's also a member of BRICS and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. But the problem is this, that instead of learning lessons from the experiences of his predecessors, Prime Minister Modi has sought to reinvent the foreign policy wheel. He went to Pakistan as a peacemaker, landing unannounced in Lahore in 2015. Similarly, he spent the first 5 years of his prime ministership seeking to build personal rapport with Xi Jinping, holding 18 separate meetings with Xi Jinping. And we know what's the outcome of those meetings. So the question that we need to ask ourselves is, why does every successive prime minister in India seek to reinvent the foreign policy wheel? Why don't we learn from the experiences of previous governments? Why is it that every prime minister who takes office seeks to, believes that he can make peace with Pakistan and with China and seeks to reinvent the foreign policy wheel? And these experiments are at the cost of the nation. The
That
reason
point
why
taken entirely. Sandeep Punithan, before I bring in Supriya and Rohan, once again I want to bring in Sandeep for his opening comments. Sandeep, our neighborhood first policy too has hit multiple air pockets, and Congress is giving details. Maldives turned hostile, India out pro-China pivot, Nepal redrawing its map, claiming Indian territory, Sri Lanka and Maldives leasing strategic assets to China. I mean, in a way, you and I may understand they may be cutting their nose to spite their face, and yet they do.
Absolutely, Gaurav. And I think the problem here is that never in our history, possibly of the last 5,000 years, have we had a superpower at our doorstep. And this is a superpower that has started to bear its fangs only very recently, Gaurav, in the last decade or so. Before that, everything was fine. Xi Jinping took over in 2012, 2013. There are 2 sides to Xi Jinping. There is, of course, the side of him as the head of the Central Military Commission. He wears a military uniform. The other side of him is the apparatchik who wears a business suit. There are 2 very distinct sides to him, and I think we looked at only one side. We tried to do peace, do business with the business suit side forgetting that he was the first leader since Mao Zedong to wear a military uniform and appear in public. And he has bared his fangs. He's declared his intent that he plans to be the #1 power in the world very soon. And I think that is the kind of attendant challenges that we have been seeing in our neighborhood, Gaurav, with the kind of, the muscling in on Ladakh in the last 5 years, which India has stood up to, but we've paid a price for that. To understand this, as Professor Chelani was saying, that we go with all of these countries in good faith, and we end up getting betrayed, stabbed in the back.
Professor Chelani made a very important point. We need to learn from mistakes of our predecessors and build on consolidating instead of trying to reinvent the wheel. But Rohan Gupta, Supriya Srinath raised a fair point. Pakistan is now the chair of UNSC Taliban Sanctions Committee and the vice chair. Imagine, it's like devil reading the scriptures. Pakistan is the vice chair of Counter-Terrorism Committee, and this happened after Operation Sindoor. China is blocking our attempts to get Pahalgam attackers named. Opposition says, what's the point of India's global outreach when no country, as Professor Chelani rightly pointed out, is willing to call out Pakistan's state-sponsored radical Islamist terror, sir?
See, absolutely not. I think, Gaurav, I don't agree with your statement. After Operation Sindoor, each and every country except 2 countries we know, I think they supported India's bid against terrorism. And I think one of the panelists rightly told that we were very clear from day one in our objective, that objective of the Operation Sindoor is to ensure that the terrorist things in Pakistan are destroyed. That's what we did. And we were very clear. Our NSA clearly told that if Pakistan will not retaliate, we will stop. So I think the kind of politics which Congress parties are indulging, वो बोलते हैं कि दिल में है चोर और दिल मांगे मोर. अरे आपने क्या किया वो तो बताइए. आप दिल मांगे मोर बोल रहे हैं, आपने तो कुछ किया ही नहीं पाकिस्तान के खिलाफ. The biggest failure of Indian history in diplomacy is 26/11, where India could not have courage even to attack Pakistan. What are you talking about? Which country was standing with us? And today we know what is the nexus of China and Pakistan. That is what we are attacking today. When I started my debate, I started with India, Middle East, European Economic Corridor. I think that is the biggest achievement of G20 declaration, and that is what India is moving forward. So we need to understand, yes, definitely we have to learn from the mistakes of our, that is what we have done. We have made our diplomacy aggressive, we have made our diplomacy independent. That is what is happening today. Our diplomacy today is independent and aggressive. We are not under pressure of anybody. And I think Trump, whose statement Congress party is referring, why they are forgetting Donald Trump's first day statement, that he said that I will not interfere. Then there was no question. This was the same Trump who told that to remove Mr. Modi, to defeat Mr. Modi, to $20 million was spent in India by US. No question by Congress party. Please don't speak in between. Let me complete. Gaurav, let me complete. I know she will become jittery, but you need to understand that Congress party has no right to ask questions to BJP. We have ensured that our diplomacy today is above Pakistan. And that is the reason what objective we had to achieve about Operation Sindoor, we achieved and we moved forward.
Today, in a democracy,
it is a
the
long-term
opposition
objective of
must
India.
ask questions and must be free to ask as many questions and as many times as they want to. But Supriya Srinath, some in the Congress may believe India is strategically isolated, but that's clearly not true, ma'am. Look at the invitation to the Prime Minister for G7. Quad will be hosted in India this year, the summit. G20 was successfully hosted by India, which incidentally, the outcomes included, as IMEC pointed out by Rohan Gupta. But if I may, inclusion of African Union into the G20. India is seen as a very powerful voice of the developing world, the global south. The Prime Minister, again, something that global leaders are talking about, is one of those rare heads of government with access both to Russia and to Ukraine. How does that show that India's clout is crumbling? India's clout is actually, as you heard all our analysts argue, is actually growing, ma'am.
And nobody is saying India's clout is not growing. India's diplomacy is failing us every single day. You answered your own question. You said we have equal access to Ukraine and Russia. Did Russia issue one? Did it issue one single statement in our favor denouncing what Pakistan does, denouncing the fact that Pak-trained and Pak-bred terrorists have consistently been attacking our people, have consistently been violating our peace, and have killed 26 innocent civilians in Pahalgam. Did Russia issue one statement? I will ask you another question. We are talking about America and we are talking about, it was said here we are very aggressive. What is our aggression worth it if Donald Trump not once but 12 times says, I got the ceasefire because of the trade deal, and he's consistently naming Prime Minister Modi? He's saying Mr. Modi and Shehbaz Sharif are great leaders. I don't like my Prime Minister to be spoken about in the same breath as a nobody like Shehbaz Sharif, but the Prime Minister is absolutely quiet about it. And let me tell you, US is not just saying that 12 times. US sent our people handcuffed in military planes, something that they did not do for a lot of countries. 682 Indians. US has been threatening us with tariffs. US called India an abuser, fraud and waster in the presence of Mr. Narendra Modi. The reality today is that US is doing deals with Turkey that provided ammunition and drones to Pakistan that mapped and attacked us. I want to ask a simple question. Your aggressive so-called foreign policy, what is it bringing to us? China is holding its control and strengthening its control over Nepal, over Sri Lanka, over Bangladesh, over Myanmar, over Maldives. And we are seeing it country after country. The reality is, you want to talk about the global south? Let's talk about the global south. Have you heard the Prime Minister or the Foreign Minister even spell out what is the vision for the global south? Have you heard any of them? And I want to ask one more thing. That one thing that is being said here is disturbing me a little as an Indian. It's being said here, Operation Sindoor had a limited purpose. That purpose was achieved, and which is why the ceasefire was called. It's another thing that 12 times Donald Trump is challenging our sovereignty by saying so, and we are not challenging him openly. The Prime Minister should rebuke him and should say, stop saying that. But the Prime Minister is not doing that. But if I were to believe that Operation Sindoor had a limited role and the ceasefire was called strategically, let me ask you a counter question. When you did Operation Sindoor, did you not think that Pakistan, which breeds people like Masood Azhar and Hafiz Saeed and Dawood Ibrahim and Osama bin Laden, will not retaliate? Why did you not evacuate places in Punch? 26 innocent civilians lost life in Pahalgam, and 16 innocent civilians, which includes children, just 12 years of age, lost life in Punch. Who's responsible for that? Why should I not ask this question? The reality is, when your foreign minister tells in a television or an agency interview that we are a smaller economy and China is a bigger economy, how am I going to fight with them? You see what's happening. You ban their apps, but you do trade with them worth $100 billion of trade deficit. The reality is that Galwan has almost been forgotten. It looks like 20 of our brave hearts never sacrificed their life. What have we done with China? We have every year increased our trade with China and increased our trade deficit. This is the
You've
policy.
raised two very pertinent points. I'm going to get Rohan and Sushant Sareen to respond.
It's not about...
Okay. Rohan Gupta, quickly respond to the point that she's raised, and since you specifically raised the issue of strategic of Sindoor, and that was a point raised by Sushant Sareen, he'll respond to that, but Rohan Gupta, quickly respond.
See, first of all, Gaurav, this is the problem with Congress party, and that's why they have completely lost the narrative as far as Operation Sindoor is. They have been changing their goalposts every day. They have been changing their questions. The point here is, you are asking questions about Operation Sindoor, about Donald Trump's statement, but you are not ready to believe your own DGMO, who says on 11th of May that on 3:35 p.m. Pakistan DGMO calls him and requests him to stop the action, military action, and we agreed to that. Why they are not ready to believe that? Why they are, please, I never spoke in between. Gaurav, why is she speaking? Why you are speaking in between? I never spoke in between. I never spoke in between. Why you are becoming frustrated?
Mr. Gupta,
I never
complete your point, sir.
interrupted her. Why she is not
absolutely.
ready to
Complete your
understand?
point, sir.
The question, the point here is, this is the basic problem. They are not ready to believe our army. That is the main problem. And you tell me in any government, Gaurav, you question your foreign minister
we
saying
believe
that
in the army, we don't believe you. You are a bunch of liars.
They could not even
We believe
justify.
in the army.
They could not
We
even
believe in
justify.
armed forces.
That is the problem.
We don't believe you.
This is
That's
the
difference.
problem. They
You are
could
not
not
the
even
army, you are not
justify.
this country.
At the
Don't
beginning
make
of
the mistake
the
of thinking
Operation
so.
Sindoor,
Don't
they are
you dare
questioning
mistake
our...
to make the
Please.
Okay,
mistake.
Supriya
Why
Srinath,
are you
let
making
Rohan
this
Gupta
short?
complete his point.
You are the people.
Supriya
Gaurav,
Srinath, only
what
Rohan
is it?
Gupta, please. Only Rohan Gupta. Only
The
Rohan
whole
Gupta,
country
complete
is
your point,
watching
sir.
you. Why she is becoming jittery? I am answering. I heard her properly. Be आराम से, जरा गुस्सा मत होइए. Point here is, Gaurav, when you question, definitely I am answering your question. You have all the rights to ask the question to the government. But you must understand, in asking the question, what are you doing? If you are questioning your foreign minister, saying that you have given information to Pakistan in advance, do you feel that anybody will buy this argument, Gaurav? They are making mockery of themselves. Definitely you ask what has happened to India, but you have to understand one thing, that we have won against Pakistan in Operation Sindoor. We should be all united. It is about your own image. You cannot keep on changing your goalpost every day. You are questioning our army every day. That is the problem with India today. You will be wiped off with this kind of narrative, whatever arguments you make. There can be improvements, there can be suggestions, there can be questions to government, but those questions cannot be at a level where your opposition, where your enemy takes advantage of this. If this simple argument is understood by so-called media
Let me get
chairman or the
Professor
media people
Brahmachala,
of the
let me get
Congress party,
Sushant
they will
Sarin to
not
respond to
mockery
that
of
point
themselves.
about limited objectives of Operation
No, I
Sindoor.
think,
They were
Gaurav, I
met.
need to make a point. This is about BJP versus the Congress. Allow me
Go
to
on,
make
ma'am.
a point, please.
Ma'am,
Please
since you
allow
also
me to
raised
make
a point,
This is not
sure,
fair.
quickly
That's
make your
what you are
point.
doing.
Yeah.
Thank you. Just a very small point I want to make. I want to ask you a simple question. In a democracy, we are raising questions. Don't you dare presume that you are this country or you are our armed forces. You are the BJP, you are in the government.
Don't
You are not
threaten
this
here.
nation,
Don't
you are
threaten.
not our armed
No, no,
forces.
okay.
Nobody
We
is
believe our
Gupta, let her
forces.
complete a point.
And
Mr.
if
Gupta,
you
please
want
let her
to-
complete a
and
point.
If you
To
want
our
to
army.
respect our armed forces,
You are asking question
If
to
you
our
want
army.
to-
We will not, don't
if
you
you
dare
want to
ask
respect
question
our
to
armed
our
forces,
army. You
if-
play your politics.
if you
Don't
want
dare
to
ask
respect
question to our
Gaurav,
army.
you'll have to
We
ask
will
him
not
to shut
leave
up,
you.
please.
Don't
This is
you
not
dare
Mr.
how I
Gupta,
think.
Mr.
question
Gupta,
or intention of this.
I did not
We
let
will
I will
I
ask
didn't
you a
I did not let
question.
Ms.
Don't
Srinath
question
interrupt
the
you,
valor
sir.
of our army.
Let her complete a point. Let her complete a point, and I want to bring in our other guests also. Okay, Ms. Srinath, complete your point, ma'am.
If you really respect our armed forces, throw out that man Vijay Shah, who called our most decorated and brave Colonel Sophia Qureshi the sister of terrorists. Throw out Jagdish Devda, who's the Deputy Chief Minister of Maharashtra, who says the Indian armed forces are lying at the feet of the Prime Minister. Unless you don't take action against these two people and multiple others in your party, don't you dare talk about the armed forces, because India's valiant armed forces, if they had been given a free hand, would have wiped out Pakistan from the face of this earth. They divided Pakistan into two in
This is what you have been
1971. We
questioning
gave
for
Pakistan
years.
a bloody nose in
Okay,
1999.
now,
Why did
I
you
want
call for
to-
a ceasefire? That's the question
Okay,
we are asking.
I want to
That's
bring in
the
Sushant
question we are
Sarin and
asking.
Brahmachalani and
You stopped our
Sandeep
army.
Punithan on the strategic point of that ceasefire. Sushant Sarin, Supriya Srinath had a point about why call a ceasefire when you're ahead in this battle, and if you did, why weren't people in Uri and Punch evacuated before those RT duels started?
Okay, Gaurav, I think we need to be very clear about one thing. India is a democracy, and in a democracy, and I disagree with Mr. Gupta, you can ask questions of the armed forces. I don't see any reason why you cannot ask questions.
Absolutely.
They're not any holy cow in India, and very clearly, at the same time, I have to say that decisions of war and peace are not going to be made by the armed forces. They have no business of making decisions of war and peace. Those decisions have to be made by the political leadership of the country. Right or wrong, that decision has to be made by them. So, yes, the armed forces input can be taken, but at the end of the day, it's the political leadership that has to decide when to go to war and when to stop the war and when not to get enmeshed in a endless conflict. That is the way democracies operate. On the most substantive question which Supriya had raised, I think the problem is that she's only looking at this one particular episode. This has been a regular problem in Jammu and Kashmir along the line of control, that whenever artillery duels start happening, you cannot evacuate full towns. It's not the first time there are artillery duels taking place across the line of control. They've happened in the past. Now, there are some areas, especially places like Uri, which is in a bowl, Punch for that matter, a couple of other areas along the line of control, where the Pakistanis are able to target our civilians, and then you pay them back in the same coin. There is no way that you can evacuate an entire town or
Okay.
completely protected from an artillery duel. Surely, if Supriya was to study what has happened in the past, she would realize that is how things work out. And finally, allow me, Gaurav, one small point.
Yes.
On this
We
whole
knew
thing
of
that did
imminent
Russia stand with
retaliation.
us, did some other country stand with us? The point is that we have ourselves taken a position that we are not going to get involved in any other war. So while
Yes.
we did not criticize Russia, did we say that whatever Russia is doing is correct? While we did not, completely back the Ukrainians, did we say that, we are against what Russia is doing in Ukraine? We did. We took a middle path. The same thing we have done, for example, in Gaza. The same thing we do everywhere. If what we do is what other countries are doing, how are we
Yeah.
cribbing again? So
And I don't see why we don't need crutches of any other countries right now is my take on this, but that's a separate story for another time. But Professor Chelani, despite Quad, China continues to deepen ties with Pakistan, with Nepal, with Maldives, blocking India at the UN. How do you read this and the kind of support one would have thought would come from Quad partners when a fellow Quad partner is facing Pakistan state-sponsored radical Islamist terror? That clearly is not happening. Or the intervention that's happening from a fellow Quad partner in a country like Bangladesh would really indicate that Quad may not be as united as anti-India blocs are.
Well, first, the regional situation for India is becoming more adverse to India's core interests, despite India's neighborhood first policy. There is no doubt about that. And this should cause great concern to us that our neighborhood is becoming more and more combustible, more and more hostile to Indian interests. This is something we need to start addressing. But on the larger issue of the ceasefire, Gaurav, the outcome of any military operation should be such that it should speak for itself. The outcome should be unquestionable. There would be no need to stage roadshows or to make statements that we had won. The outcome should be such that it speaks for itself. Now, we gave Pakistan 15 days notice that we're going to launch military strikes. So what did Pakistan do? It showed up its defenses. It emptied its terrorist camps. So when we struck on day one, military doctrine is clear that for an air war to be effective, you have to first take out the enemy's air defenses.
Yes.
That's the first principle of air war. But what did we do? We decided at the political level that we will only strike terrorist camps in Pakistan. Only after we lost some warplanes and only after Pakistan hit our military facilities did our armed forces get the permission to strike air defenses and military facilities in Pakistan. It was on day 3 morning, as you have reported several times, in a 23-minute operation, India devastated a string of Pakistani air defenses. And yet, just a few hours later, India accepted a ceasefire. So the question that many are asking this question.
Okay.
Why did India suddenly abruptly accept a ceasefire? What prompted India at the political level to accept a ceasefire just when Indian armed forces had gained the upper hand militarily? That question, Gaurav, will not go away. Historians will ask that question. It's not a political, a partisan political question. It's a question that goes to the core of why we launched Operation Sindoor. If we were going to end Operation Sindoor, cease
Sandeep,
Operation
you've been
Sindoor
speaking.
after 3 days,
Yep.
Gaurav, we would have been better off not launching it, because we could have actually exerted more pressure on Pakistan by keeping the military threat alive and exerting pressure on Pakistan instead of launching an operation.
Sir,
and then
but bombing between you and
roadshows.
I want to bring in Sandeep, Professor Chelani, bombing 13 of his air bases and radar stations that you've never done in the past is spectacular. That's a spectacular achievement. Bombing him in Muridke and Bahawalpur, that's never been done in the past. Sandeep, you know, while I completely agree with most of the points you're making, this is a point, you know, this is something which has been absolutely spellbinding in India's war on radical Islamist terror. We've never done it before. Bombing him from Skardu to Bulari, Sandeep.
Absolutely, Gaurav. You know, and in fact, Operation Sindoor should be seen in that light, Gaurav. We've crossed a Rubicon that we did in 1998 with the nuclear tests of Pokhran. And I think that Operation Sindoor is another Rubicon that we've crossed when it comes to securing India's strategic interests. The fact is that for 4 decades, we've been threatened by this nuclear blackmail that Pakistan has unleashed on us. Pakistan has come in, they've attacked Mumbai in 1993, they've killed 270 Mumbaikars. In 2006, they've massacred 202 Mumbaikars. In 2611, they killed 166 Mumbaikars. We never responded even once inside Pakistan. Now with Operation Sindoor, what has happened, Gaurav, is that supersonic missile blizzard that was launched on the 10th of May, that was basically payback for all of the terrorism that Pakistan has inflicted on us for the last 3 or 4 decades. And with that, we've come to something like what you can call a Modi doctrine, where the Prime Minister has very clearly said we are not going to be blackmailed by nuclear threats anymore. And the fact is that, any war, any attack on India, any terror attack on India is going to be seen as a war against India. And there will be no distinction between the state and the non-state, Gaurav. These are 3 very important percepts. And this is as significant as what we said after Pokhran in 1998 on how we are going to use nuclear weapons.
Will
this
it work?
Actually
is that big debate?
Well,
Will
it has
work?
to. As the Israelis say, Gaurav, you have to keep mowing the grass every few years. This will buy you a few years of peace, and then you have to keep doing it. Because
I have sadly, gentlemen and ladies, run out of time on this part of the show, but I'd love to have all of you back on the show with me very soon. But as I take a break and thank all of you for joining me, I just want to say one thing. It's actually a civilizational thing in our country. Remember, when Abhimanyu was killed, Arjun took that pledge, I will kill Jayadratha either by sundown or I will die. Or when Bhim said, I will either break Duryodhan's thigh or I will, not consider this war over. Similarly, not taking down the enemy's air defenses and only targeting enemy terror stations. Let's not bind ourselves in all these pledges. It's a civilizational thing. Don't do it. As Yogeshwar Sri Krishna said, when you have to kill the enemy, yuddhai krit nishchaya, and destroy the enemy. Do not tie yourself in pledges the way Arjun did for Jayadratha, because every time there will not be a Yogeshwar Sri Krishna who will come and bail you out of that situation. That is all I have for you on India First this evening. Many thanks for watching.